For today's video, I'll be going over how to feed a Walstad Method aquarium in a way that helps both your fish and plants thrive without needing to use liquid fertilizers. Thanks to the wide variety of high quality fish foods on the market today, this is far easier to do and a lot more affordable than it once was. However, if you are new to the hobby, it can be a little difficult to figure out which foods are best suited for this type of setup. Before I go any further, I just want to say I'll be using footage from my Walstad and non-Walstad tanks for this video just to keep things more interesting. So I want to start by briefly explaining what makes feeding unique in a Walstad Method aquarium. While Dianna Walstad does mention that specialist liquid fertilizers like those used for topping up iron or potassium can be used in a Walstad tank if necessary, most people who turn to this method, including myself, try to avoid adding anything like that when possible. Personally, I like to set these tanks up with a goal of adding as little as I can while still getting a thriving ecosystem in my aquarium. The nutrient-rich soil provides a great foundation for plant growth, especially in the beginning, but over time some of these nutrients do start to deplete. That's when the second layer of fertilization, the things that we actually add to the tank, becomes more important. In my tanks, the only two things that I consistently add after the initial setup is fish food and water to counter evaporation. So far, this minimal input approach has worked really well in my Walstad Method tanks, and I'm planning to stick with it moving forward. But it does mean that we need to make those inputs count and get as much value out of our fish food of choice as possible. So moving on to the types of fish food that work well in a Walstad Method aquarium, and thankfully these days it's actually quicker just to talk about what you should be avoiding. Take this ingredient list from Heron's Ultra Tropical Flakes, which is a popular budget option here in the UK, and you can see that brewer's yeast is listed as the main ingredient. Then there's these Shrimp Pro Nano Nibbles, which are new to the market and actually have a premium price tag attached to them, but as you can see, wheat is their primary ingredient. Personally, I try to steer clear of any food where the primary ingredient is something generic and low in nutritional value like wheat or yeast, because these are usually classed as filler ingredients in higher quality foods. Due to the low nutritional value in this type of ingredient, these fillers don't really offer much benefit for either your livestock or your plants. Now, it is important for me to note that most of my fish are omnivores or insectivores. If you're keeping herbivores, you'll want to tweak this slightly, but the principle remains the same. You want your main ingredients to be real food types that are highly nutritious. In my fish room, the main two food brands that I use are Fluval Bug Bites and the Hikari range. I highly recommend both, especially for a Walstad Method tank where you're looking to avoid the use of liquid fertilizers. Personally, I like to alternate between the two brands each day to give my livestock a varied diet, and then usually on a Sunday I'll replace these foods with treat food options such as bloodworm and daphnia. Switching between the different primary ingredients helps ensure that my livestock are getting plenty of nutrients from their diet, and in turn, their natural waste or any leftover fish food that's decaying in the tank nourishes the plants. Now, I often get asked how much I actually feed my fish, and unfortunately it is difficult because every single tank is different. The type of livestock you keep, the size of your aquarium, how many plants you keep, the type of plants you keep, and several other variables will all play into how much food you need to add to your tank, so there will be some testing and adjusting required on your part. Now, just to try and explain why I actually choose these fish food products, I want to take a closer look at the ingredients list that they each have. Starting with the green labelled Fluval Bug Bites, which I use for my Corydoras, Siamese algae eater, snails and shrimp, but my other fish will also nibble on these if they get the chance. This ingredient list is directly off Fluval's official website, and right away you can see why I'm a fan. Black soldier fly larvae makes up 30% of the formula, followed by salmon as the second ingredient, which makes up 22% of the formula. This means that over half of the food consists of high quality protein-rich ingredients, which is perfect for the majority of my fish. On top of that, there's several plant-based components such as peas, potato and rosemary, which offer further additional nutrients. Next up is the Blue Label fluval bug bites, which are the exact same formula in the two foods, it's just the darker Blue Label has a slightly larger granule size for larger fish. I usually only get the dark blue version of this if I can't find the green label of fluval bug bites in my area when I need it. However, the light Blue Label is one of the primary foods that I use in my fish room for smaller fish like my tetras, rasboras, guppies, white clouds, medaka, and my shrimp and snails. If we look at its ingredient profile, it contains 38% black soldier fly larvae, 20% salmon meal, followed by fish concentrate, peas, potato, and then eventually wheat right at the bottom. Now let's move on to the Hikari range and starting with the sink and wafers, which I alternate with my green label bug bites each day. These wafers list fish meal as their primary ingredient, and while they do contain some fillers, there's also beneficial ingredients mixed in with those, and my Clitoris and shrimp absolutely love them. Then there's the Hikari micro pellets, which I alternate with the light blue fluval bug bites each day. The first ingredient here is fish meal, followed by krill meal, along with other nutritious components further in the ingredient list like cuttlefish meal and seaweed. It's very easy to compare these ingredients list with other products on the market, and thankfully there are some other excellent options out there that might fit your needs perfectly, but it's always worth checking because some products have low quality ingredients in them. Next up, I want to talk about adding potassium, as this is an essential nutrient for plant health, and a lot of people use the Walstad method in a filterless setup, so the health of your plants is critical. As I mentioned earlier, Dianna Walstad mentions in her book that potassium can sometimes be tricky to maintain naturally in a Walstad method tank. And on top of that, she actually mentions a supplementation of both potassium and iron with liquid fertilizers if needed. Now, depending on your specific setup, using a liquid fertilizer might be the most straightforward and beneficial option for you, especially if you're only focused on plant health. But I've been experimenting with an alternative approach that takes the whole ecosystem into account, specifically by feeding my shrimp and snails highly nutritious foods in hope that their waste helps boost potassium levels in the tank for the plants. I've been testing several potassium-rich foods to see how well they perform, and here's a list of the ones that I've tried. The banana on this list is literally just added for a reference point. I haven't actually tried it in my tanks. It's just a high potassium food people instantly think of, and these potassium values are per 100 grams. As you can see, spinach ranks very high in potassium content, and as a bonus, my shrimp, snails, my Siamese algae eater, and my guppies absolutely love picking at it and eating it. But that said, some viewers did point out when I mentioned this previously that spinach contains oxalates, which can potentially be harmful to shrimp if fed too often. So I have started testing other foods from that list because I have been adding spinach on a daily basis to my tanks, and this food-based strategy does seem to be working well. Originally, I started experimenting with it to try and address a potassium deficiency in one of my Java ferns, but I've noticed other improvements in my Bacopa caroliniana and one of my Anubias that also had potential potassium deficiencies in other tanks. Now, feeding leaves to your tank on a daily basis can be messy because they tend to break down quickly and leave a lot of particulate matter in the water column. So now I've started to look for cleaner options that still have a high potassium content but also help fill the nutritional profile in my shrimp and snails in my tanks. Here's a second table of options that I'm considering, and again, banana is only included for reference and values are per 100 grams. Many of these foods are available in a shrimp pellet form, and I want to give some of them a try throughout the rest of this year. At the moment, I am definitely leaning towards getting some Shrimp Pro dandelion leaf pellets that are 100% dandelion leaf next month to move over to them and see if they end up releasing a lot of particulate matter into the tank as well. But they do seem promising because they are 100% dandelion leaf and have more potassium than banana by weight. My thinking is that feeding one of these dandelion pellets per day could be a great way to improve my shrimp and snails nutrition, while also naturally boosting potassium levels in the tank to help my plants, similar to how I've been using the spinach. Finally, I just want to quickly touch on how nutrients actually make their way into the plants in a Walstad Method tank. Dianna Walstad does cover the topic of sediment versus water column uptake in her book, but a lot of people still mainly focus on root uptake when it comes to aquarium plants. Personally, I do believe that leaf and stem uptake is a lot more common in a low-tech tank like a Walstad Method aquarium. Even this recent blog post from ADA, which is one of the most respected brands on the aquascaping side of the hobby, focuses on nutrient absorption via the stems and leaves of the plant over root uptake when creating natural aquascapes. As I mentioned earlier, most of the fish food we add is consumed by the livestock, and what's left over starts to break down and decompose in the tank. One thing that always sticks with me from Dianna Walstad's book is her philosophy of feeding the fish well and always adding a little extra for the plants. In my opinion, the fish waste and leftover fish food and any decaying plant matter in the tank are broken down by beneficial waste-eating bacteria, which convert that into its simplest elemental forms, and then the plants can absorb it via their stems and leaves. But here's where most people make a mistake. For this process to work, you have to leave the fish waste, a small amount of leftover food and decaying plant leaves in your tank. Don't remove it during maintenance. You can look at the substrate in this Walstad Method aquarium, which is over a year old now, and there's no visible detritus buildup in here. The waste-eating bacteria colonies just stay on top of everything and release the nutrients from the actual physical matter and then release it for the plants to use. I know this goes against what's often recommended for other aquarium methods, but with dirted tank setups it really is one of those trust the process situations. As long as you're not overfeeding too much, the bacteria populations in the tank will naturally grow to a level where they can stay on top of everything for you. Anyway guys, that brings us to the end of the video, and there are certain situations where just using a potassium liquid fertilizer can save you a lot of time, but personally, I'm happy with the strategy I've been using because it helps nourish my shrimp and snails and my plants. Thanks for watching, have a good day and good luck with the plants in your Walstad Method aquariums.